الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Okay, this is the second lesson of Huruf al-Ma'ani, prepositions and particles. We've been through, well, there was 11 prepositions and particles that we had to go through in total. And now we are on to the final 5. So there's 5 remaining. And let's crack on. So today we're going to be going over specifically hatta, which generally means until. We've actually come across a word which also can mean hatta, so you've kind of been introduced to this concept before of hatta. Hatta, however, has quite a few different possible meanings. Right? It's actually one of those in Arabic where I think, especially for me, when I was learning Arabic initially, the word hatta used to trip me up a lot because often it's used as until quite a bit, but it's also used as other words. It's also used in other. It also has many other uses. And if you're just translating hatta as until, you're not going to quite fully understand. You're not going to understand what hatta means in those other cases because the word until doesn't quite match those other uses, and so it's really strange. It's like you're trying to make sense of it. This point, hatta, this point, and then you're like, okay, until doesn't quite make sense. And then you try and translate it in the other sense with the word until, and even that, you're just trying to force a meaning there, though you've got the nuance, but you're still trying to use the word until because you're stuck to the literal meaning. And then eventually, when you get to usul, you realize, oh, actually, hatta has other meanings. And, I can't translate it here as until. It's just not in that meaning. That's not the usage. And that's kind of empowering because then you kind of realize that, hatta doesn't mean until here, and it means, something else. So that, or, whatever else. Anyway, we're going to go through hatta. Then we're going to go through ila. Ila means to, as in, it's like to. Again, remember we said there was loads of meanings of to. Well, ila is the closest of them, which means like extent. We'll go over that. And then we're going to do ala. And ala, again, has a number of meanings. So ala means upon. And ala also has a number of meanings. So we'll go through that as well, inshallah. And then, well, not finally. Then we have fi. And again, fi is another one which has multiple meanings. Fi has multiple meanings as well. It's used in a number of different places. Fi means in, right? The preposition in. So that's fi. And then we've got ba, which is probably the one that we should have covered first, but here it comes last. In most books of grammar, ba comes first. And ba is an interesting one. I feel like its literal usage can't really be translated into English. But we'll cover that in the lesson when we get to it, inshallah. So with that, let's get stuck in. So the next of the particles that we are covering, namely the 7th of them, because we did 6 previously, this is the 7th, it's hatta. So hatta, we've actually covered the meaning of it previously. It came up when we were doing o. So we said that one of the metaphorical meanings of o is hatta, is until. And then we gave the example of لا أدخل هذه الدار. Sorry, لا أدخل هذه الدار أو أدخل هذه الدار. That I will never enter this house until I enter that house. Right? And you could replace the word o with hatta and it would give you the exact same meaning. Okay, so hatta means until. But what do we understand from the word until? How do we describe the meaning of until? Even in English, we don't really describe the meaning of these things. We just kind of know them. And hatta is very unique because, well, it's not very unique, but it's interesting because in English, we understand certain nuances that we're going to describe, but you probably have never thought about these nuances, actually. Like, they're just subconscious that They're just subconscious nuances that you apply whenever you use the word, and you instantly know if the word doesn't make sense or it's used incorrectly. But you're never able to put a finger on why it's used incorrectly, right? So you just hear it; it doesn't quite make sense. Like, for example, if I said, "Wait until 3 miles," you instantly know that doesn't make sense. But why doesn't that make sense? You've never really thought of that. So today we're going to be going over all of these kind of rules in relation to the word hatta. Well, and as well as all the other words that we're going to do, inshallah. Okay. So the word hatta means until. And the word until is to mention the extent or the limit of something, right? To show how far an action happened or how long an action took, or when to show that the action extended, but this is where it stopped, right? So for example, we can say, I continued until I reached home. So the action of continuing stopped or ceased or finished when I reached home. So the word until is used to show the extent of the action. Likewise, I ran until here. So the action of running extended until I reached here. So with hatta, with a sentence where you've got this word hatta, you've got an action which is prolonging, and then you've got the word until, and then you've got the limit of that action. So you, for example, I ran until here. Ran is the action which is prolonging. Until is telling you that this action is going to have a limit. And then what is the limit? Here. So the word here, the limit comes after the word until and after the word hatta, even in Arabic. Okay, so we understand how to use the word until. But there's some conditions, because sometimes it doesn't make sense to use the word until. There's only certain types of words that the word until can be used with. Like I said, we subconsciously understand this in English, and we subconsciously realize that certain things make sense or don't make sense. First of all, the word hatta can only work if the action that it's describing is something that can extend. An action that extends or an action that prolongs, right? An extending action. So for example, if I said, I stopped until I reached home, instantly you know something doesn't make sense. Like I said, in English, we intuitively understand these rules, even though we've never been able to say, oh yes, you stopped until I stopped until I reached home. Somebody would tell you, hang on, that doesn't quite make sense. What they wouldn't say is, yeah, that doesn't make sense because you've used until with a word that doesn't extend. Right? You don't actually know the rule, but you intuitively know it. Just subconsciously, it's there because of the amount of time that you've been familiar with the language, and and you're familiar with the word, with how the word until is used in English. So you just know that it doesn't work in this scenario. So like the word stop isn't an action that can prolong. The word stop, it just happens. It doesn't prolong. It doesn't extend. So you can't limit something that doesn't extend, right? Because it's already inherently limited. The word stop, it happens. So I stopped. That means that I've already limited, myself to the action I was doing. Whatever I was doing previously, I've now stopped doing. Now I can't continue to stop doing something, because once you've stopped, you're not doing it anymore. So you can't carry on stopping. So it's not an action that can extend. That's what we're trying to get here. And there's other words, other examples of actions that can't accept the word until. Like, for example, I paid £1,000. You can't say I paid £1,000 until what? Until all the money was given? It doesn't make sense. You can't extend. The word paid doesn't extend. Likewise, I offered £1,000. I can't continue. The word offering doesn't extend. It's just you offer and then it's done. You've made the offer now. Now, if you made another offer, that's different, but that's not part of the same offer, right? You can say, I continued offering. That means I did multiple offers. I offered and offered and offered and offered, right? Now the offerings themselves are continuing, but the actual offer isn't continuing. So the actual to offer is just a one-time thing. Anyway, so those are examples. Like again, actually another one. I arrived. You can't say I arrived until I reached home. It doesn't make sense. Once you've arrived, you've arrived. Once you've arrived, the thing that's allowing you to arrive has now stopped, so you can't arrive again unless you go again, right? Right. So the condition was that the action being described must be a valid action. Sorry, the action being described must allow prolonging, must be an action that prolongs or extends such that you can limit it. Okay, that was the first condition. Now the second condition is that the limit has to make sense. So the action prolongs, sure, but now the thing that you're limiting the action with, whatever the limit is, that has to make sense for that action, right? It has to be something conducive to that action. So you can't say, so if you said, I waited until Tuesday, okay, that makes sense, right? Waiting is an action that prolongs. Great. Tuesday, is that a valid limit for waiting? Yes, it makes sense. You can wait until Tuesday. Tuesday is an extent to waiting. How about if I said, I waited until 3 miles? That doesn't make sense, because waiting is something that happens in time. 3 miles doesn't happen in time. They don't work together. 3 miles is an invalid limit for waiting. The verb waiting cannot be limited by 3 miles because they exist in different, dimensions. Likewise, I can't say I waited until yesterday. It doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense. So the action has to be something which prolongs, and the limit has to be valid for that action. And if both of those are true, then you can use the word hatta as the word until. Then the word until makes sense effectively. And like I said, in English, we subconsciously apply these rules anyway. We understand intuitively when something makes sense because of these rules, and we understand intuitively when it doesn't make sense because of the lack of these rules being followed. Okay. Now here is where hatta then differs from the word until. So here's where the word until no longer matches the word hatta. If now the action, if one of these rules aren't followed, right? So if the word hatta comes in a sentence with an action that doesn't prolong, or the word hatta comes in a sentence and the action prolongs, but the limit is invalid for that action, right? So what do we do then? So for example, I can say, if I said, I'm going to stop eating hatta you bring the ice cream. So number one, stop eating is not an action that can prolong, right? So stop eating already can't accept prolonging, so you can't use the word until. So hatta here clearly can't mean until. It wouldn't make sense. I'm going to stop eating until you bring the ice cream. Doesn't make sense, right? Doesn't make sense. Also, I mean, you bring the ice cream isn't quite a valid limit either, right? But the action doesn't prolong, so, it doesn't really matter. But why would you stop eating until you bring the ice cream? Surely when the ice cream comes, you're going to carry on eating because you're going to eat the ice cream as well. So it doesn't quite make sense, that as a limit. So anyway, it's not going to make sense. I'm going to stop eating until you bring the ice cream. You can't use hatta as until there. So you can say, I'm going to stop eating hatta you bring the ice cream. What does hatta mean here? That brings us to the first metaphorical meaning of hatta. Hatta can be used metaphorically to mean so that, to indicate the effect, to indicate that this is the outcome of the previous action. So we can say, I'm going to stop eating so that you bring the ice cream. So hatta here, I'm going to stop eating hatta you bring the ice cream so that you bring the ice cream. What's happening now is I'm going to stop eating is now the cause, and hatta is explaining the outcome of that cause. I'm going to stop eating so that you can bring the ice cream. What's happening here? The hatta is in the meaning of kay, the Arabic word kay, kaf, ya, kay, which means so that. Right. So that was the first metaphorical meaning of hatta. Likewise, you can't use the word until in this meaning of hatta. The other metaphorical meaning of hatta, well, there's another metaphorical meaning of hatta as well. So if the so that doesn't work, right? If it doesn't make sense to say so that, because the thing isn't quite an effect of that cause, it doesn't quite make sense, right? Then we have another meaning. So I'll give you an example before I tell you what that meaning is. I'll give you an example of cause not working. I'm going to stop eating hatta you bring the ice cream next time. So now I've added next time. So now if I say I'm going to stop eating so that you bring the ice cream next time, well, that bringing the ice cream next time isn't really an effect of me stopping eating. If I stop eating, is that really going to make you bring the ice cream next time? It doesn't really make sense. Now, maybe somebody can say this and, there might be a context in which this does make sense. But, we're just talking general examples here. It doesn't quite make sense according to, our normal understanding. So, let's look at the third meaning. The third meaning of hatta, which is another metaphorical meaning. You can make it an atf, a conjunction, in the meaning of fa. Remember we did fa? Fa means then, right? One thing happening directly after the previous thing. So conjunction, two things coming together, and then to show an order, one thing after another. So you can say, so it's like the meaning and then. So hatta here in the meaning of fa, translate it to and then, to show conjunction. I.e., I'm going to stop eating and then you can bring the ice cream next time. So here, it's just a conjunction. It doesn't matter if the two sentences don't quite match up, right? It will work in this case. So if it doesn't work in the first case, because it's not a valid limit, well, then you can move to the second case. And then if it doesn't work in the second case because it's not a valid cause of the outcome, well, then you can go to this case and hatta can mean and then. So you've got a three-step situation here. The first meaning of hatta, the literal meaning, until. If until doesn't work, so that. If so that doesn't work, and then. So that's the three meanings of hatta. And I just want to add one more thing here. A lot of people get confused with the word hatta because they think hatta until. And then hatta comes in these other different metaphorical meanings that don't work with until. And you're sitting there and you think hatta means until. So, how does this sentence make sense? And you sit there and you try and just force it to make sense in some way, but you're still confused. So the reason why is because you've not studied this topic of usul here. And you've not realized that hatta has these other meanings, right? It does come up in grammar actually. But anyway, a lot of people forget that. So you don't realize the different ways that hatta can be used. And because until is very clear in English and it has a very clear but limited way of use, hatta doesn't apply there. Hatta doesn't quite match that. Hatta can be used in many different ways with multiple uses, as you've just seen. So if you guys ever, if you guys are studying Arabic and you get confused with hatta, recall this, right? Eventually, most Arabic speakers probably just, figure it out just through sheer usage and eventually just get familiar with the language to the extent that they understand what hatta means and the various uses of hatta. And this applies to all the prepositions and particles that we have covered as well. They all have different nuances and meanings and usages as we've seen. Anyway, so that was hatta. We move on now to the next word, which is ila. Ila means to. The literal meaning of ila means to. And again, it's showing the extent of something. It's showing the end of an action, right? So I traveled from London to Manchester. It's showing the extent of travel. Very similar to hatta. I traveled until something happened. Here it's different. I traveled to Manchester. I traveled from London to Manchester. I traveled from New York to Los Angeles, right? Okay. This is very simple, right? Ila, the literal meaning is to. And ila can't be used for anything else. There is one discussion though. Is the limit included in the action? So for example, in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, ثُمَّ أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ. Complete the fast until the night. And likewise, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. So wash your, so فَاغْسِلُوا وُجُوهَكُمْ وَأَرْجُلَكُمْ إِلَى الْكَعْبَيْنِ. So wash your faces and your feet to the ankles. Now, are your ankles included or not? Does the limit for ila, so remember, ila al-ka'bayn, to the ankles. Now, is the ankles included in the washing or not? Is it up to the ankles or is it up to and including the ankles? Likewise, when you fast, is it fast up to and including the night? Or is it up to the night only? So this is the discussion. And effectively, the summary of it is there's a big long discussion here in Mabadiul Usul, but I don't quite like the way he's explaining in Mabadiul Usul. The Usul al-Shashi explanation is much better. And so because of that, I'm just going to give you a quick summary and move on. We're not going to go into it in detail. But this is one discussion. Does the limit get included within the range or not? Does the limit get included within the action or not? So, first of all, you'd have to look at whether the limit is inclusive or exclusive. So is the limit including something or is it excluding something? So for example, أَتِمُّ الصِّيَامَ إِلَى اللَّيْلِ, is that telling you to fast until the night, i.e. including everything? So it's telling you fast everything until you get to the night, which means that when you get to the night, you stop. So the night is excluded. This is because until here is being used to include. Fast until something. Do this and include everything until you get to the limit, right? Carry on going until you get to this street. Now the other type of extending action is an exclusive limit. So you can have an exclusive limit, which is where it's like, can't remember the example for this one. I purchased the land from this place to that place. Here now, you are excluding things. So I purchased the land. So I purchased the land from this wall to that wall. So you purchased the land, the whole land is included at the moment, and you're excluding the parts of the land that you don't want. So this wall to that wall. So the walls are the limits which are excluding. So when it's an excluding limit, it's included in the ruling. It's a bit opposite, right? If it's an including limit, if the limit is it's telling you what's included in the limit, then the limit is excluded because the limit is now telling you until here. And if the limit is excluding everything, is excluding, what's not part of the ruling or what's not part of the action, then the limits are included because it's telling you up until and including these. So I purchased the land from this wall to this wall, including both of these walls. At least that's how I understand it, right? Again, you don't quite need to know this. You just need to know that this is a discussion. You'll probably deal with this in more detail when you cover, again, a more detailed usul book. For now, just know that ila indicates to a limit. And that limit, there's a discussion within the fiqh books amongst the jurists whether the limit is included or excluded within the actual ruling. Right, that was ila. Moving on to ala now. Now, ila was to ala, this is the ninth preposition, particle. Ala means on top of. For example, I sat, jalastu ala al-ard, I sat on the earth. Jalastu ala al-kursi. I sat on the kursi, the chair. So that's ala. Now ala is for ilzam. Upon me, i.e., necessary upon me, is £1,000. I have to pay £1,000 is how we would say in English. But in Arabic, you use the word ala, which means upon or on. So ala necessitates something. It's ilzam. It's forcing something on someone. So, for example, if I was to say, "Hey, you owe me £1,000," in Arabic, you'd say the equivalent in Arabic would be, "Upon you, for me, is £1,000," i.e., forced upon you, necessary upon you, is £1,000 for me, i.e., you owe me £1,000. That's how you say it in Arabic. Upon you. Upon is used to force something, to necessitate something, to ilzam, to impose something. However, that might be the literal meaning of ala. Now, ala has a metaphorical usage as well. So that was the literal usage, to force, to impose. Now, the metaphorical usage is, it comes in the meaning of ba. Now, ba doesn't quite have a translation. Ba is kind of just to connect two things together. So ala can come here in the meaning of ba, metaphorically. We'll cover ba later. But ala can come in the meaning of ba, but only when it's talking about exchanges. So if we're discussing an exchange and the word ala is used, then it's telling you, it's informing you what the exchange is. Let's give you an example. If I say, "I have purchased this thing upon 1,000." So you're describing an exchange. A purchase is a type of exchange, right? A trade, purchase, is you buying something and you're purchasing something. You're getting an item. You're purchasing an item in exchange of some money. So this is an exchange. So when ala is used in an exchange context, it can have the meaning of, like ba, it can have the meaning of exchange. So I am purchasing this upon 1,000, i.e., in exchange of 1,000. I am purchasing this for 1,000. So ala can also have the meaning of exchange. And this is like ba. This is where ala is taking the meaning of ba, right? And we'll cover the particle ba in a minute. Okay, so that was the second meaning of ala. There's a third meaning of ala. This is another metaphorical meaning of ala. It can be in the meaning of a shart, a condition. So you can say, "Give me this upon paying me 1,000." Or sorry, "You are freed upon paying me 1,000," right? Or "You are divorced upon 1,000," i.e., or actually that's kind of like an exchange. So you can say, "You are divorced upon you paying me 1,000." Anyway, ignore that example. Right, that's too close to an exchange, though it does work here, but just for the sake of example, let's find an easier one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "O believers, يا أيها النبي إذا جاءك المؤمنات يبايعنك على ألا يشركن بالله شيئا." So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, "O believers, when the believing women come to you to pledge allegiance to you, على ألا يشركن بالله شيئا, upon the condition, upon that they do not associate any partners with Allah." So they are pledging allegiance to you upon that they don't associate any partners to Allah. Ala, they don't associate partners to Allah. So what does that mean? Upon the condition. So this is the third meaning of ala. Ala can mean upon the condition that, right? "Give me this upon the condition that you give it back to me tomorrow." That's how you'd say in Arabic. But we don't use the word upon in English for that. we kind of say on the condition. So we can kind of add those extra words, but you don't just use the word on. So like, give me this on that you give it to me tomorrow. We don't kind of say that. So ala in English isn't kind of used for this metaphorical meaning. But you have to know that in Arabic it is. So ala, the third meaning is that it can be used to show a condition, to show a condition for something. So they will pledge allegiance to you on the condition that they don't associate any partners with Allah or anything as a partner to Allah. Right, that was ala. We have 2 remaining we'll do in the final part of the lesson, inshallah. On to our final 2 huruf al-ma'ani that we're going to discuss. And the next one is fi, the word fi in Arabic. Very common, again, most of these are very common. Now the word fi in Arabic, you can translate it as the word in, right? However, in Arabic, it's a bit more broader than the word in. The word fi has a bit more of a wider application. It's a bit more universal of a word than the word in English is. And we'll look at that. So the word fi in Arabic is to denote a place or a location, just like in English, but it's also to denote a time. So a time or a place. So in Arabic, time and place are both used for the word fi. In English, the word in doesn't denote time. I can't say in tomorrow or in today, but I will say in China or in the UK or in India or in the US or, in Mecca, right? I can say in, or, in can denote a place, but in cannot denote a time. In Arabic, fi can denote a time as well. So, for example, there's loads of examples, but a person says, I appropriated, or I, appropriated, or what's the other word for ghasab? Appropriate, we'll go with appropriated. I appropriated a cloth in a towel. Well then, that means that the cloth was inside the towel, and both of those things will now become under the ruling of appropriation. So you're saying that he stole both of those things. Appropriate basically means that, you borrowed something and never gave it back. Or, you took somebody's wealth. You didn't necessarily steal it, but you took it unrightfully. You appropriated it. You took it. You might have had it for a valid reason, but it wasn't yours, and you pretended like it was yours, and now the other person wants it back. Well, even if the other person doesn't want it back, it's not yours if they haven't given it to you. So, I appropriated a cloth in a towel. Well, now the cloth is inside the towel. You've appropriated both of them. So the word fi is telling you the location of this cloth and telling you that both of them fall within this ruling. Right. So that is fi. That means in, or so place or time. Right. Now we're going to go more into the uses of fi. So the first one is, let's go with time. Fi can be used for time. As I said, in English, in cannot be used for time, but fi can be used for time. So for example, a person in Arabic can say, Anti taliqun fi ghadin. That literally translates to, you are divorced in tomorrow. Right? Again, we wouldn't use it like that. You can also say in Arabic, Anti talikun ghadan. You are divorced tomorrow. Right? But you can also use the word fi to mention, to say that it was in this period of time that is specified by tomorrow. In English, as I said, you can't use it like that. So it's a bit unintuitive. So you are divorced in tomorrow versus you are divorced tomorrow. In Arabic, Anti talikun ghadan and Anti talikun fi ghadin. What's the difference between those two sentences? There's a whole discussion here in Mabadi al-Usul mentioning a difference of opinion. So Sahibain, the students of Imam Abu Hanifa, they say that they say that there's no difference, and Imam Abu Hanifa says there is a difference. And I don't really want to get into this because it's, you know, a bit long-winded. So I'm just going to leave it out, right? I think the summary of it is basically Imam Abu Hanifa says in tomorrow, if he intended, so whatever, if he intended sometime later on tomorrow, like tomorrow evening, then he would be valid in his intention. But if he's just said tomorrow, then as soon as the beginning of tomorrow comes, i.e. the minute that Fajr time starts, just as soon as the dawn of tomorrow starts, then that divorce would occur. Whereas if he'd said in tomorrow, and he intended a specific time, he's allowed. But if he'd intended a specific time, when he said just tomorrow without the in, then he wouldn't. Then his intention wouldn't be considered. And in Sahibain, they say they're both the same. They both occur as soon as tomorrow starts. Anyway, again, it's not too important, but it's there. Right. So that was the first use of fi, which can mean to indicate to a time. And then fi can be used to indicate to a place, as is quite obvious, right? Like anti taliqun fi Makkah, you are divorced in Makkah, right? Except that divorce can't be restricted to a specific place. It can be restricted to a specific time, but it can't be restricted to a specific place. Over here, the divorce wouldn't occur because you can't tell someone you're only divorced in Makkah. That doesn't quite work. So yeah, fi can be used to indicate to a certain place. Right. Then the third one is if fi enters on a verb, then it doesn't mean the word in. It has a completely different meaning. And it kind of gives the meaning of condition. So remember we talked about condition, the meaning of condition under ala. The ala can give the meaning of condition, so like upon the condition. So fi can also give that meaning. It's like in the condition that, but we don't really say that in English. So for example, anti taliqun fi dukhulika ad-dar. You are divorced in your entering the house. What does that mean? Again, you don't translate fi as in here, but I've just done that just to indicate that there's a fi. Right. Anti taliqun fi dukhulika ad-dar. You are divorced fi, you're entering the home. You are divorced by entering the home. You are divorced by your entry into the home. I.e., if you enter the home, you will be divorced. It's a condition. If you enter the home, you are divorced. So the fi is to show a condition. This is the third meaning of fi. So that was the three meanings of fi. Okay, so we move on finally to ba. And last but not least, in fact, definitely not least, because ba is actually probably the most common of all of these particles that we have covered. In fact, if you read Arabic, you'll definitely see ba more commonly than all of the others, even though the others are also very, very common. But ba is easily the most common of all of them. Maybe and were and is a bit more common than ba. But ba is also very unique in that it has so many different meanings. It has over 20 different uses. So, you know, previously we've talked about all of these. We've had some which have like 3 and 5 uses. Ba has over 20. It has so many uses, right? Tab'eed and isti'ana. And, you know, if you look in a grammar book, ba will come first because ba has the most, right? And because maybe it's very, very frequent, etc. Ba always comes first when they discuss the, you know, the huruf, the huruf al-ma'ani, or when they discuss the, you know, the usages of different prepositions and particles. They always mention ba first, and they'll have like loads and loads and loads of different usages that they'll mention. So ba, definitely not least, right? But over here, ba has been brought last, and we've got a very limited discussion on ba. However, it's still a very important discussion. Now, ba, I would argue ba doesn't have a great translation in English. I don't feel like the concept of ba matches to any concept in English, right? We don't really use language in English in the way that ba is used in Arabic. We kind of use other constructs to have the same meaning, and we don't really explain things in the same way that ba explains in Arabic. Some people translate ba as with, but I feel like that's not very intuitive, because if you find any sentence in English with and you translate it to Arabic, most of the time you won't use ba to translate with. You'll use ma'a or some other construct. Anyway, let's get on to it. Ba is for ilsaq. Ilsaq means attaching something. You're attaching this thing to something else, right? That's ilsaq, attaching, adhering. So for example, I can say amsaktu bi Zaydin. I stuck to Zayd. I adhered myself to Zayd. That's a very, very literal way of saying it. What amsaktu bi Zaydin actually means, like the normal meaning is, I grabbed hold of Zayd. I stuck myself to him, i.e. I grabbed hold of him. So when I say so if I would say to an Arab, amsaktu bi Zaydin, they're like, oh, so you grabbed hold of him. That's what amsaktu bi Zaydin means. I can also say amsaktu bi yadihi. I grabbed hold of his hand, right? I adhered myself to his hand. I attached myself to his hand. So effectively what's happening here is you've got the principal thing, and then something else is being attached to that principle. So Zayd is the principle, and I'm attaching myself to the principle, right? So I grabbed hold of Zayd, i.e. Zayd can go wherever he wants now, and I am going to follow him, for example. Or I grabbed hold of his hand to show that I'm going to follow him, right? He's the principle, and I am merely following his hand, right? Because I've held his hand. So ba can show an attachment to something else that is the principle. So there's various different examples. As I've already mentioned, amsaktu bi Zaydin. Now, amsaktu bi Zaydin is interesting because if I'd said amsaktu Zaydan, I grabbed hold of, amsaktu Zaydan. Amsaktu means to grab hold of, right? But if I said amsaktu Zaydan, that kind of means I restrained Zayd, right? I.e. I stopped him from doing what he wants to do. But when you add the ba, amsaktu bi Zaydin, then you don't have that meaning of restrain anymore. Now it's a meaning of attachment. I grabbed hold of Zayd. I have attached myself to him. Do you see the difference in nuance? Amsaktu Zaydan. I have restrained him. I've arrested him, tackled him, right? It's different to amsaktu bi Zaydin. I have attached myself to him. There's more of that meaning of ilsaq that comes about through the use of the word ba. Now in English, notice I've not really translated that ba with an intuitive word ever. I grabbed hold of Zayd. I stuck myself to Zayd, right? A lot of people might say, I stuck myself with Zayd. But again, that doesn't really make sense. But it kind of has that meaning of with, like attaching something to something else, i.e. with something else. But again, you understand now why with isn't quite the best translation. So in English, we don't really have a translation for the literal meaning of ba. Another example, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. In the Quran it says, wipe your head. But it says, بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. Not وَامْسَحُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ, وَامْسَحُوا بِرُؤُوسِكُمْ. I attach the act of wiping to your head. So wipe, do the wiping on your head. And then there's some various nuances over, that implies that there's part of the head and not all the head. And so there's difference of opinion onto exactly how much of the head. It's not wipe your full head, otherwise that would be وَامْسَحُوا رُؤُوسَكُمْ, right, without the ba. But because it's used the ba now, it kind of gives this additional implication. Anyway, that's beyond the point. That's not what we're focusing on here. The point is ilsaq. Ba is to show attachment. Right. That's all you kind of need to know for the purpose of this course in regards to ba, right? However, there is one additional usage linked to ilsaq, right? So you can also use ba to show a price of something or to show an exchange. Do you remember when we did ala? When we looked at ala, we said that ala can be used to show an exchange in the meaning of ba. So remember, ala is upon. So he said, for example, if you show an exchange, so I purchased this book upon 1,000. I purchased this book ala alfin, upon 1,000, i.e. upon payment of 1,000 or in exchange of 1,000. That's what ala meant in that. That was one of the metaphorical meanings of ala, is that ala comes in the meaning of ba. So here is ba. So let's look at this exchange meaning. So ba can come in the meaning of exchange. How does this mean adhering? Where is the meaning of adhering coming when you're talking about an exchange? Because what you're doing is you're adhering the product to the price, right? Or the price to the product, for example. So if I said, I have purchased اشتريت منك هذا الكتاب ب10 دراهم. I have purchased this book from you B 10 dirhams. I have purchased this book from you B 10 dirhams. I am attaching the purchase of the book to the price of 10 dirhams. Do you understand? I am attaching the purchase of the book to the price of 10 dirhams. So that's where the meaning of attachment comes in. That's the literal meaning of ba. Now there's various metaphorical meanings of ba. Like I said, there's over 20 that have been mentioned by one scholar. In one source I mentioned, most Nahwa books probably have about 14, 15 or something. However, we're only going to be focused on, the book only mentions the literal meaning here, and then it mentions that there are various other metaphorical meanings, and then it doesn't explain them, it just kind of lists them. So we'll leave it there at that, inshallah. This is Huruf al-Ma'ani done. We've covered all 11 that the book wanted us to understand. Alhamdulillah. So that was the Huruf al-Ma'ani. All 11 of them are now done. Let's just summarize the final 5 that we covered in this lesson. So first off, we started with the word hatta. And we said the hatta means until, and that until is used to show the extent or the limit of something. And then we said that it can only really show the extent or a limit of something if, number one, the action that it's describing the extent of is something that can be extended. If the action itself can be extended, then you can describe the extent of it, right? That was the one thing. And then the other thing was the limit itself has to make sense for that action. So for example, we said, an example of hatta was, wait until Tuesday. So the action of waiting has been extended until the limit, which is Tuesday. The extent of the waiting is Tuesday. Now, waiting is an example of an action that can be extended, but there are examples of actions that can't be extended, like paid. I paid 10 dirhams. You can't extend that action. I stopped at the house. You can't extend that action. Once the action happens, it's done. So the action must be extendable, must be an action that prolongs, that extends. And likewise, the limit has to be valid. The limit, so an example of an invalid limit is wait until 3 miles. 3 miles is an invalid limit for waiting. Likewise, wait until yesterday. That limit doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. So in the event that either the action can't prolong or the limit doesn't extend, hatta has another metaphorical meaning that might make sense instead. And that is the meaning of kay, so that. Hatta can come in the meaning of kay, so that, if it's in a situation where the until meaning doesn't make sense for the reasons that we mentioned above. And so an example of hatta in the meaning of so that is, I'm going to stop eating hatta you bring the ice cream. I'm going to stop eating until you bring the ice cream. Doesn't make sense. I'm going to stop eating so that you bring the ice cream, right? So that's an example of hatta in the meaning of so that. That's a metaphorical meaning. Now the final metaphorical meaning of hatta is, let's say that, so that kay, the previous one that we talked about was so that. That is to show a cause of something. Now let's say the cause doesn't quite fit, right? It still doesn't fit, right? Something still doesn't quite make sense here. Then we can just use it in the general meaning of conjunction, joining. Hatta can just be used to join two sentences together in the meaning of fa, right? We covered fa previously. Fa means and then, to show an order of something, to join two things and to show an order. So hatta can come in that meaning. For example, I'm going to stop eating and then you can bring the ice cream next time. It wouldn't make sense if you said so that in that case. So then we can go with the meaning of and then, hatta in the meaning of fa, and then in this case, right? So that was the three meanings of fa. Moving on to ila. Ila was to show the extent of an action. Again, very similar, to show the limit of an action. So, for example, I traveled from London to Manchester. You are limiting the travel to Manchester. Then we discussed whether the limit is included within the action or not, right? Again, that's not too important. We'll ignore it for now. In the summary, you can go back to the lesson. There was a detailed explanation there. As I said, it's not that important. But just know that the limit can be included or excluded, and that there's a difference of opinion between the scholars in how they take it and the various rules for when the limit is included or excluded. And then we gave the examples from the Quran of, fast until the night. Is the night included? Or wash your hands, your arms until the elbows. Is the elbows included? Actually, it doesn't actually say that. Ila al-marafiq. It does say that. But we use the example of feet until the ankles. Do you have to wash the ankles as well or not? Anyway, moving on. Ala. Ala means upon. And it comes for the meaning of ilzam. So one meaning is upon, the meaning is upon, but it can also be used for ilzam, right? It can be used to show, to make something necessary upon someone, to impose something. So, for example, if I was to say, I owe this person a debt, in Arabic you'd say, upon me, i.e. imposed upon me is a debt belonging to him. So I owe him £1,000, upon me, imposed upon me is £1,000. That's ala, that's the literal meaning of ala. Now ala can also come in the meaning of ba, right? To show exchange. So in the context of exchange, ala can take the meaning of ba to show the price of to show the exchange, to give the meaning of exchange, i.e. in exchange of is how you translate it. So for example, I have purchased this upon 1,000, i.e. in exchange for 1,000, or upon the payment of 1,000, you can say maybe, right? So ala here in the meaning of exchange, right? And it's in the meaning of ba, because ba is used to exchange, right? That is ala. And the third meaning of ala is to show a condition, right? To say that upon the condition of, and we gave the verse of the Quran, Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu idha ja'aka al-mu'minatu yubayi'naka ala an la yushrikna billahi shay'a, right? That they will give you pledge of allegiance upon the condition that they do not associate partners with Allah and do not do zina, etc. So they will pledge allegiance upon the condition, ala, right? So ala here is used for condition. So that was the three meanings of ala. Literally, imposing, and then metaphorically, it can mean ba, i.e. exchange, and finally, it can mean condition. Right, fi. Fi has three meanings. Fi comes in the meaning of place or time, generally, right? That is the meaning of fi. Now in English, we don't really use the translation of fi to mean time. Fi means in English, but in English, the word in is usually used for place, not for time. So for example, you can't say in tomorrow. So in Arabic, there's three uses of the word fi. The first one is for time, as I just said. So in Arabic, you'd say something like, in tomorrow. You are divorced in tomorrow. We don't use that in English. Anti taliqun fi ghadin. In tomorrow. You can also say, Anti taliqun ghadan. You are divorced tomorrow. Now there is a difference between those two. According to Imam Abu Hanifa, those sahibain say that there's no difference, and we discussed that in the lesson. Again, it's not that important. I'm not going to go over it in the summary. You don't really have to know that. Just have to know that. Well, you don't really have to know that, right? But in tomorrow, but fi can be used as time. The second way that fi can be used is for place, just like in English. So I say, what do you call it? If you say, you are divorced in Mecca, or I saw the towel, the cloth in the towel, right? Is to show a place. It's to show that this is located in this place. So that is to show place. And in Arabic, same thing. So if you say you are, yeah. Anyway, and then the final meaning of fi is it can be entered upon a verb to have a meaning of condition, right? And you can't use the word in as a translation for this. So for example, you can say, you are divorced في دخولك الدار. أنت طالق في دخولك الدار. You are divorced in your entry to the house. Again, in doesn't make sense here. So it'd be like, you are divorced upon your entry to the house. Again, you're using this upon in this weird meaning of condition. So you are divorced if you enter the house, effectively, is what we're saying. So in Arabic, you can use the word fi to mean a condition if it's entered upon a verb. If fi enters upon a verb, it can mean a condition. You are divorced in your entry to the house. You are divorced by entering the house. That is kind of what this means. Anyway, those were the three meanings of fi. Number one, time. You are divorced in tomorrow. أنت طالق في غد. Number two, place. You are divorced in Mecca, though divorce can't take place in divorce can't be specific to places, so that wouldn't work. And then number three, condition, i.e., you are divorced in your entry to the house or by entering the house. Okay, that was fi. Finally, we've got ba. Ba comes to attach one thing to another, right? We don't really have a translation in English, as we discussed, a long explanation, right? Ba comes to attach something to another, like amsaktu biyadika. I have attached myself to your hand. That's the literal, very, very literal way of saying it. But actually what it means is, I have grabbed hold of your hand, i.e., I have attached myself with your hand, i.e., your hand is what I'm going to follow. You can go wherever you want, and I am going to subordinately follow because I have attached myself to you. Anyway, so that is ba lil ilsaq. Now, ilsaq, you can also use this meaning of ba for attachment when you're talking about exchanges. So when we said ala can be in the meaning of ba for exchange, right? This is what we're talking about. So ba can be in the meaning of exchange, because what you're doing when you exchange is you're attaching the purchase of this item to this price. So for example, I have purchased from you this book for £10, then I am attaching the purchase of this book to the price of £10. So this is the meaning of attachment. As I said, in English, there's not really a very good translation for ba. It's kind of like attach to. That word to is probably the closest we get. A lot of people use the word with, which doesn't intuitively make sense in English. So that was the literal meaning of ba. And then we had loads of other metaphorical meanings of ba, which we didn't go into. And that is the remaining 5 huruf al-ma'ani summary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you guys all ilmun nafi' and make this easy for you.